Most people misunderstand imagination. They treat it as something childish, unrealistic, or disconnected from serious life. From an early age, imagination is slowly pushed aside and replaced with rigid ideas of practicality. Yet the same people who dismiss imagination often struggle with confidence, clarity, and inner stability. This is not a coincidence. Imagination is not the opposite of reality. It is the preparation ground for how reality is experienced. The mind does not first act and then believe. It believes first, and the body follows. Every thought you repeatedly imagine creates a pattern. That pattern becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes comfortable. The nervous system responds to imagined experiences in a similar way it responds to real ones. When a person imagines fear, the heart rate changes. When a person imagines failure, the body tightens. In the same way, when a person imagines fulfillment, calmness and confidence begin to form. This is not philosophy alone, it is how the mind has always functioned. You are already using imagination every day. Most people simply use it unconsciously and against themselves. Many individuals constantly imagine what is missing in their life. They replay scenes of rejection, lack, and delay. Over time, the mind accepts these images as truth. The body then moves in accordance with them. Posture collapses, the voice weakens, decisions become hesitant, and effort feels heavy. Life begins to reflect this inner state. The person believes the world is the problem, without realizing the inner training has already decided the outcome. Imagining fulfillment is not about lying to yourself or denying current circumstances. It is about choosing the inner state from which you operate. When you imagine yourself fulfilled, you are not claiming that everything is complete. You are training the mind to experience stability before chaos appears. This is similar to martial training. A practitioner visualizes movement, balance, and control long before stepping into a real confrontation. When the moment comes, the body already knows how to respond. Clarity does not arrive by accident. It is built through repetition. When you imagine yourself calm in difficult situations, the mind begins to recognize calm as an option. When you imagine yourself confident while speaking, the voice gradually loses tension. When you imagine yourself disciplined, distractions lose some of their power. Imagination creates familiarity, and familiarity reduces fear. What once felt impossible begins to feel normal. Many people wait for confidence before they act. This waiting becomes endless. Confidence is not something that appears suddenly, it is the result of repeated internal alignment. By imagining yourself already capable, you give the nervous system permission to relax. A relaxed system learns faster, responds better, and makes clearer decisions. This is why pressure often blocks progress. The mind under pressure narrows its vision, while a trained mind remains open and aware. Direction in life is also shaped by imagination. A person who constantly imagines confusion will drift, even if opportunities appear. A person who imagines purpose begins to notice paths that were always present. The external world does not change immediately, but perception does. And perception determines choice. Choice determines habit. Habit shapes destiny. There is a quiet discipline required here. Imagination must be guided, not allowed to wander freely. If left uncontrolled, it will return to old fears and old stories. Training the mind means consciously choosing what images are allowed to stay. Each time you redirect imagination towards strength instead of weakness, you are practicing mental control. This is no different from physical training, where repetition builds muscle. Over time, the difference becomes visible. A person trained in fulfillment moves with patience. They speak without unnecessary explanation. They do not chase validation because their inner state is not starving. Their actions are precise rather than desperate. Life begins to respond differently. Not because of magic, but because behavior has changed at a fundamental level. Imagining fulfillment also reduces attachment. When you no longer feel empty inside, you stop clinging to outcomes. You do your work with focus, not anxiety. You accept delays without losing discipline. This inner stability is often mistaken for luck by those who do not understand its source. In reality, it is the result of long, quiet training. The mind must experience before it can express. If you never allow yourself to feel fulfilled internally, you will constantly sabotage external progress. But if you repeatedly imagine yourself whole, capable, and grounded, the mind begins to treat these states as natural. From there, actions align effortlessly. Imagination, when used correctly, is not escape. It is rehearsal, it is preparation, it is inner discipline. Through it, clarity sharpens, confidence stabilizes, and direction becomes visible. What you imagine consistently, you eventually embody. And what you embody, life eventually reflects. Most people attempt to change their life by adjusting the surface. They change their environment, their routine, their appearance, or their strategy, yet feel the same frustration repeating in different forms. This happens because outer change is often treated as the cause, when in reality it is the effect. What truly directs behavior is the inner state a person lives from each day. Before a decision is made, before an action is taken, a feeling has already set the direction. Every belief carries an emotional tone. That tone quietly shapes how you move through the world. If you believe life is against you, you approach situations with tension and suspicion. If you believe you are capable, your body relaxes into effort instead of resisting it. The same opportunity appears to two different people, yet their inner state determines whether they recognize it, avoid it, or misuse it. The difference is not intelligence or luck, but the condition of the mind observing the moment. Repeated inner experiences form habits long before behavior becomes visible. A person who constantly feels doubt begins to hesitate without realizing why. Their pauses look like overthinking, but they are actually expressions of an internal belief that action is unsafe. Over time, hesitation becomes identity. In the same way, a person who repeatedly feels calm in uncertainty learns to act without panic. Their steadiness is not personality, it is training. The body is the first place where inner state reveals itself. Breathing patterns, posture, muscle tension, and eye contact all reflect what is happening internally. When the inner state is rushed, the breath shortens. When the inner state is insecure, the body collapses slightly. When the inner state is stable, movement becomes efficient. Others respond to this without conscious analysis. This is why some people are trusted quickly, while others struggle to be taken seriously. The message is transmitted before words are spoken. Attempts to force confidence from the outside often fail because the inner belief has not changed. Affirmations repeated without emotional alignment feel empty. Motivation fades when it is built on pressure instead of clarity. True change begins when the inner state is addressed honestly. This requires observation rather than judgment. You must notice what you repeatedly feel when facing responsibility, uncertainty, or challenge. These repeated feelings are shaping your future more than any plan. Decisions are not made in the moment they appear. They are prepared internally long before. When a person believes they are undeserving, they unconsciously choose smaller goals. When a person believes effort will not be rewarded, they avoid consistency. These choices look logical on the surface, but they are guided by internal conclusions formed through past experiences. Until those conclusions are examined, the same results will repeat under new circumstances. Inner state also determines how setbacks are interpreted. Two people can experience the same failure, yet one becomes disciplined while the other becomes defeated. The event is neutral, the meaning assigned to it is internal. If the inner state is resilient, failure becomes information. If the inner state is fragile, failure becomes identity. Life does not decide this for you. Your inner conditioning does. This is why sustainable change cannot be rushed. The inner state must be trained gradually, through consistent exposure to calm, responsibility, and self-trust. When you repeatedly return to stability after disturbance, the mind learns that difficulty is survivable. Over time, courage replaces avoidance. Clarity replaces confusion. The outer world then reflects this shift naturally, without force. External results often lag behind internal change. This delay causes many people to abandon the process too early. They look for immediate proof and, not seeing it, return to old habits. But inner alignment works quietly. Behavior adjusts first, then relationships respond, then opportunities align. What looks like coincidence is actually delayed causation. When the inner state changes, effort feels different. Work no longer feels like resistance, it becomes expression. Discipline no longer feels like punishment, it becomes structure. This is the difference between someone who burns out and someone who grows stronger under pressure. The outer workload may be the same, but the inner experience determines sustainability. Peace is not achieved by controlling life, but by controlling response. Once the inner state becomes stable, the outer world loses its power to dictate emotional direction. Challenges still appear, but they no longer define self-worth. Success still matters, but it no longer controls identity. This inner independence is the foundation of real freedom. To change your results, you must first change the state from which you act, not through denial, but through awareness and training. What you repeatedly feel becomes what you repeatedly do. What you repeatedly do becomes what life reflects back to you. When the inner state is aligned, outer change is no longer a struggle, it becomes a consequence. Most people experience lack as if it were an objective truth, something proven by circumstances, numbers, or comparisons. They say they lack time, money, confidence, support, or opportunity. Over time, this idea of lack becomes so familiar that it feels unquestionable. Yet if you observe closely, you will notice that lack is not only a description of a situation, it is a habit of attention. The mind repeatedly looks for what is absent, and whatever the mind repeatedly looks for begins to feel dominant, even if it is not. From childhood, many are trained to measure themselves by what they do not yet have. Education emphasizes gaps in knowledge. Society highlights what must be improved. Media constantly presents images of what others possess. Slowly, the mind learns to scan for deficiency. This scanning becomes automatic. Even in moments of stability, the mind asks what is still missing. In this way, lack becomes a background noise that never fully stops, regardless of how much is achieved. Suffering intensifies when a person begins to identify with this mental habit. The sentence changes from "something is missing" to "I am missing something." At that point, lack is no longer about resources or timing, it becomes identity. The person feels incomplete, behind, or unworthy. This identity shapes behavior. Effort becomes desperate. Comparison becomes constant. Joy becomes conditional. Even success feels temporary, because the mind quickly moves on to the next absence. What is often overlooked is that every person already possesses more than they recognize. Breath is present. Awareness is present. Capacity to learn is present. The ability to endure difficulty is present, proven by survival up to this moment. Yet these realities are quiet. They do not demand attention the way fear does. Development requires patience, while lack demands urgency. The untrained mind follows urgency. Recognizing what is present does not mean denying ambition or settling into comfort. It means establishing a stable base from which growth can occur. A builder does not ignore the foundation while planning the upper floors. In the same way, a person who ignores their existing strengths while chasing future goals creates instability. Growth built on perceived emptiness collapses easily under pressure. The habit of focusing on lack also distorts time perception. The mind projects fulfillment into the future and treats the present as a waiting room. Life becomes something to endure rather than participate in. This creates frustration even during progress. Each step forward feels insufficient because attention remains fixed on what has not yet arrived. The journey loses meaning and discipline weakens. When attention shifts toward what is present, something changes internally. Effort becomes grounded instead of frantic. Gratitude does not reduce ambition, it sharpens it. A person who recognizes their current capacity trains more effectively because they are working with reality, not fighting it. They stop demanding that life prove their worth and start proving their readiness through action. Lack, when seen clearly, is often a comparison rather than a truth. You compare your beginning to someone else's middle. You compare your internal struggle to someone else's external presentation. These comparisons feed the illusion that you are behind. In reality, each path unfolds at its own pace. Development cannot be rushed without consequence. When the mind accepts this, pressure softens and consistency becomes possible. Another source of suffering is mistaking potential for absence. Not having mastered something yet does not mean you lack the ability to learn it. Not having arrived does not mean you are lost. Growth requires time, repetition, and exposure to difficulty. When lack is interpreted as failure instead of process, motivation collapses. When it is understood as a stage, discipline strengthens. The mind that constantly identifies with lack also struggles to receive. Even when opportunities appear, they are dismissed as insufficient or temporary. Compliments feel uncomfortable, support feels undeserved. This creates a cycle where abundance is present but not integrated. The problem is not access, it is recognition. Developing what is already present requires patience and responsibility. You must train skills before demanding results. You must strengthen character before expecting trust. This approach replaces complaint with practice. Instead of asking why life has not given more, you ask how you can refine what you already hold. This shift restores agency. As this mental habit changes, suffering decreases naturally. Not because challenges disappear, but because identity is no longer built on absence. You no longer measure yourself by what is missing, but by how you are developing. Progress becomes visible. Effort feels meaningful. Even difficulty carries value. Lack loses its grip when it is seen as a signal, not a sentence. It points to an area of growth, not a verdict of inadequacy. When the mind stops clinging to what is absent and commits to developing what is present, life stops feeling like a constant chase. Stability emerges, and from that stability, real growth becomes possible. Most people try to change their life at the level of ideas. They think differently for a moment, feel inspired briefly, and expect reality to follow. When it does not, frustration appears. This happens because change does not occur through thought alone. Real transformation happens when thought, emotion, and action move in the same direction. This unity is embodiment. Without it, even the best ideas remain weak, and motivation fades as quickly as it arrives. To embody a state means to live from it, not think about it. When someone truly feels as if they already have stability, direction, or worth, their behavior changes automatically. They do not rush to prove themselves. They do not beg for validation. Their actions become deliberate rather than reactive. This is why embodiment is more powerful than intention. Intention points the way, but embodiment walks it. The state of already having is often misunderstood as arrogance or denial. In reality, it is an inner posture of sufficiency. It does not mean you stop striving. It means you stop chasing from emptiness. When effort comes from emptiness, it carries desperation. Desperation clouds judgment, weakens discipline, and shortens patience. When effort comes from sufficiency, it carries focus. Focus strengthens discipline and allows progress to unfold steadily. Thoughts shape emotions, emotions drive actions, and actions reinforce beliefs. When these elements are misaligned, internal conflict arises. A person may think positively but feel insecure, or feel motivated but act inconsistently. This creates exhaustion because energy is divided. Embodiment removes this division. The mind believes, the heart agrees, and the body follows. Movement becomes efficient, and resistance decreases. When someone embodies fulfillment internally, discipline stops feeling like force. Routine becomes structure rather than restriction. Training becomes care rather than punishment. The person no longer asks, "How long until I arrive?" Instead, they ask, "How do I refine today?" This shift changes the relationship with effort. Progress becomes a byproduct of consistency rather than a reward for struggle. Others sense embodiment immediately. It is visible in posture, timing, and speech. A person who lives from sufficiency does not over-explain. They do not hurry their words. They listen fully before responding. This presence builds trust without effort. Opportunities appear not because the person demands them, but because they are prepared to receive them. Embodiment also stabilizes emotion. When setbacks occur, the person does not collapse internally. Their identity is not tied to outcomes. They experience disappointment without self-rejection. This emotional steadiness allows learning to continue even under pressure. Where desperation narrows perception, embodiment keeps awareness wide. Living from the state of already having also clarifies priorities. You stop chasing everything and start choosing deliberately. You invest energy where it matters. Distractions lose their appeal because they no longer promise to fill an inner gap. This clarity accelerates growth more than intensity ever could. Importantly, embodiment is practiced, not imagined once. Each day, you align small actions with the inner state you are cultivating. You stand with intention. You breathe with awareness. You complete tasks fully rather than rushing through them. These small acts signal the nervous system that stability is present. Over time, the state becomes natural. As alignment deepens, life responds differently. Resistance decreases. Relationships improve. Work gains momentum. These changes appear gradual, but they are reliable. What looks effortless from the outside is the result of long internal consistency. Embodiment turns vision into behavior and belief into movement. When thoughts, emotions, and actions align with sufficiency, desperation dissolves. Discipline becomes natural, progress becomes steady, and growth becomes sustainable.